Live from SABC headquarters in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Welcome to this week's final edition of The Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvogo, and on the show tonight, the Competition Commission is fixing the country industry by industry. We look beyond yesterday's raids at offices of South Africa's biggest insurance companies to the benefits for you and I after the crackdown. Respected scholar and previously one of South Africa's most loved political analysts, Dr. Somadoda Fikeni was this week appointed chairperson of the Public Service Commission. But does he and his commissioners have teeth? After enjoying a period of relative peace and stability, one of the components of the broad mass liberation movement goes to an election conference this weekend. Can the PAC rebuild from here? Incumbent President Mzwanele Nyonzo is one of my guests this evening. The Watchdog starts now. One of the country's biggest labor union federation, SAFTU, says it will be encouraging its members to pursue litigation against the 8 insurance companies suspected of price fixing. That's if they are found guilty. The Competition Commission yesterday carried out surprise raids on the premises of 8 major long-term insurers suspected of price fixing. It's all, of course, part of their investigations. They include heavyweights like Sanlam, Old Mutual, and Discovery.
The South African Federation of Trade Unions, SAFTU, says ordinary South Africans that are already struggling to make ends meet in these tough economic times cannot afford to be victimized further by corporates that they've over the years trusted with their finances.
The fixing of prices does not only concern us because these companies have broken the law, but primarily because the price fixing affects our members badly. Ordinary workers who have insurance liabilities and assets such as funeral covers and life covers are impacted by price fixing as it makes premiums and monthly installments very expensive. This adds to the rising cost of living.
The Labour Federation says it will support all efforts as it pushes for a recourse for the affected citizens.
Because they claim to be clean, fair and efficient, SAFT will support every effort to hold them accountable for fixing prices higher and burdening our workers, and to expose their hypocrisy about free market capitalism.
The Competition Commission seized documents and other evidence that it will use to strengthen its investigation on the possible collusion to fix prices by these insurance companies.
Well, there is now a possibility for repeat offenders to be fined 25% of turnover. There is also a possibility of criminal penalties. So I think the South African law is tough enough against cartels. Of course, the prosecuting authorities have to do what they have to do.
The Competition Commission maintains that more insurance companies are likely to be added onto the list of those under investigation. Katlego Lehodi, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Makhale Moshala heads the cartels division at the Competition Commission, and he joins us on the line. Good evening, sir. Thanks very much for your time, Mr. Moshala. It's been a busy 48 hours for you. Take us through the background first, if you will. In other words, what gave rise to this surprise?
Good evening, Vuyo, and good evening to our viewers. In terms of background, the Commission received information which indicated that the long-term insurers, namely Sanlam, Old Mutual, Discovery, Momentum, Hollard, and the likes, have been sharing information, in particular price information, for quite some time, some years back, from 1980s to date. Information in particular relating to the fees that are paid for retirement annuities, as well as the premium for life covers, disability covers, funeral covers, and chronic medical condition covers. So this information, they share it in order to enable them to align on pricing of their existing products, that is in case they want to increase prices, or pricing of the newly developed product. So with that information, we started the investigation as the commission, and we decided that the best way to gather evidence in this matter is to conduct search and seizure operation, which we have successfully done, and we have seized evidence, hard copies and electronic, that we're going to assess in detail to determine if indeed these firms have engaged in price fixing or fixing of trading conditions in contravention of the Competition Act. Mm-hmm. In brief, that is the background.
Mm-hmm. Now, under what circumstances do you do these surprise rates to prevent or what? Or yeah, what's the point or purpose of surprise rates?
Well, search and seizure operation is one of the ways in which the Commission gathers evidence. So it's an evidence gathering tool. So the circumstances under which we use them usually include where there's a likelihood that if we request the information, we may not get it. So sometimes it's the nature of the information. If it's electronically stored, you might not get access to a laptop to examine it. So you've got to get the search warrant so that you can have the powers to examine that particular laptop you wanted to examine, or even copy it, or even seize it. So it's case-by-case basis, but it's really in circumstances where you are of the view that any other method of evidence gathering would not yield the outcome that you are looking for. Then you would opt for a surprise visit in the form of search and seizure.
Have you had problems with cooperation from these industry players before?
No, not before. We haven't really investigated them before. This is the investigation. Even with the search and seizure operation, they understood that we have to do what we have to do. They cooperated with our operations yesterday. There are still some residual activities going on now, which they remain cooperating on. So I would say, yes, they are cooperating.
I mean, you probably would have seen or read or heard some people saying, well, what was with the drama? You could have asked for the information and you would have gotten it.
No, I think I've said that you make an assessment as to whether the information, if you request, you will get. So this is a conduct that has started in the 1980s. So even to date, we are still sitting here, it is continuing. It has not stopped. What would make one think that a conduct that started in the 1980s, if it's uncovered, the participant in that conduct will be willing to come clean and say, yes, I've been doing this for these decades. It's a kind of assessment you make. So it really shows that they were going all their way to hide it. For as long as they are not caught, they were going to continue with it, because no one knows that they are doing it. And if you just ask them, the possibility that they will deny it is very high. And once they deny, you can't force them to admit. You can't say, no, you're doing it. What would be the basis of that? Which is why we didn't want to take that chance. We decided that we've got to raid so that we secure the information on our own.
Of course, I mean, there's also the possibility that they may hide stuff. They may become aware that you are focusing on them, and then they start hiding the tracks.
Indeed, they actually even destroy. This evidence that is largely stored electronically, it takes a click of a button in a computer to get rid of it. So you don't want to risk losing information and fail to resolve a problem that has been bedeviled in the society for a very long time. When you have that opportunity, you must make sure that you use it.
Of course, I mean, you would have heard from the insert we played there, some of the country's unions, I know, really congratulating you on this, because for a very long time, the working class in particular has been suffering from the heavy-handedness and, as they say, sometimes arrogance as well of people who lead this particular industry. So a great deal of hope in what you are about, or you have just undertaken. But from your assessment of the industry, or from what you know about the industry, if indeed the allegations turn out to be founded or true, greater or lesser extent, what could be the tangible outcomes? What could be the benefits, especially for those vulnerable sections of our community?
Yeah. So this is an investigation. So while we are confident with what we have in terms of evidence that we seized, and confident that we will successfully make a case against the firms. I just need to caution that it is still an investigation. We have not concluded, but we obviously conducting the investigation with the view of getting convictions against those that are accused of contravening the law. So if we succeed, which is what we want to, we were determined to succeed in prosecuting these players, and we of course also saying to them that they have an opportunity. The opportunity is always there for them to come and engage us and resolve the matter. But if we succeed in our prosecution, which I've already said we're determined to, we will go for a maximum penalty. And a maximum penalty here, we're talking the 10% of their annual revenue. But more importantly, we want to dismantle this cartel so that consumers out there can start getting competitive prices from these long-term insurance companies, and also getting product choices. So cartels, as we always say, in their very nature, are designed to inflate prices. They're designed to increase profits for the cartelist. So when you dismantle a cartel, you are, in a way, forcing players to compete in the market. When they compete, prices would naturally goes down, and as prices goes down, consumers will benefit by getting lower prices, but also because they are competing, they are forced to develop new products in order to outcompete each other, and that development of new products gives consumers product choices. So in the broader scheme of things, except just the penalty, there's also prices going down. There's also choice in terms of the products that the consumers may want to have.
And that's as far as you can go as the competition commission. In other words, with respect to other issues, let's say people who may have long-standing issues that remain unresolved with one insurer or the other, that's for the ombud to deal with. The reason I am putting this out there is because already you've begun hearing people talking about their individual cases. That, for example, at some point they instituted a claim, and this guy simply didn't care. They dismissed their case, and then those people had to move on. So, as the Competition Commission, you're dealing with the issues of competition, you're dealing with the cartels, the unfair profiteering, and of course breaking the back of the cartels. Everything else has to be dealt with by the Ombud.
Indeed, there are other instruments, other regulations that consumers can resort to in case they are unhappy with the manner in which they have been treated by these insurance companies. Those things would not necessarily fall within the jurisdiction of the Competition Commission. Competition Commission here is investigating allegations of possible price fixing, nothing more.
Any idea how long this is going to take, or do you have timelines of any sort?
No, we of course want to finalize this investigation as quick as we can. We seized quite voluminous data that we need to examine very carefully, and usually the process of examining that data takes some time. But it is our desire that the matter of this nature that touches on people's pockets should be resolved expeditiously for the benefit of the consumers of this country.
Mr. Makhala Muthala, let me thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, sir. Good evening.
Of course, he's the cartels division head at the Competition Commission following that raid yesterday at 8 of South Africa's biggest insurers like Sanlam's, your Old Mutuals, your Discovery. We'll see what comes out of this process. After the break, I sit down with Dr. Somadoda Fikeni following his appointment this week as the chairperson of Watchdog body, the Public Service Commission. It has a duty and a mandate to evaluate the organization and administration of South Africa's entire public service. That mandate also entails the evaluation of achievement or lack thereof of government programs. President Cyril Ramaphosa this week announced his appointment of Dr. Somadoda Fikeni as the Public Service Commission's new chairperson. Good evening, sir. Thank you very much for your time.
Good evening, Vuyo, and thank you for inviting me.
Congratulations are in order.
Well, thank you very much. Tall order, but I have to climb up to it.
Tall order indeed, and I remember from previous conversations, whenever in the months you've been there, whenever the reports have been released, those quarterly reports, we've had you on the program. And I'm sure by now you will have done your own assessment, of the challenges, facing the commission in how it has to execute its task. Just overall or broadly speaking, has the commission, or is the commission able to actually undertake, this task, given the setup that is there currently? In other words, how you function as a commission, the way the public service functions with all the challenges the country is facing. Are you poised?
The first thing is to say that nothing is impossible. As the founding president of the Democratic South Africa, Mandela, said, it looks impossible until it is done. The Public Service Commission, the first thing it has to do, and it is doing, is to look into itself, reposition itself so that it is in a better position, fit for purpose, to do the work. The second one, it's a number of policy reforms which are taking place, which I'm sure are going to have a greater impact and make the work of the Public Service Commission easier. Amongst those, professionalization of public service. That framework is to be served before Cabinet, is to become the framework of the country where meritocratic system is going to be put in place. There is a Public Service Commission Act which is trying to assert the independence of Public Service Commission itself. But for it to be effective, there is an ecosystem. First, working with the Chapter 9 institutions like your Auditor General, the Public Protector, the Human Rights Commission, Gender Commission, and so forth, we have a common forum where we're beginning to say we can do more and have a greater impact in our complementary but distinct roles if we work together. Also, Parliament that we report to, if it is taking some of the reports that we're taking as the basis of acting against departments and the executive authorities, ministers, and so forth, all different role players, the problems of South Africa now are so complex that you need the civil society, you need the business sector, you need government to work together. We will play our part as the Public Service Commission, and we will then be working with different components for our success.
Perhaps let's start with the commission itself and what it needs. I mean, you're talking about the independence. What is the difference between what is prevailing at the moment, what is there in terms of the law, and what people are now aspiring to, that which the new legislation that is being piloted would then do or give the commission?
Well, the first thing is the architecture of the commission itself when it was founded as the commission. A government department, which is the Office of the Public Service Commission, was created. It operates like any other government department, very often works with the Public Service and Administration Department. And when we appear in Parliament, we appear under that portfolio committee of public service, when in fact we're supposed to be an independent body overseeing different departments. So the new act is going to make sure that we operate like a commission. The second part is that in the new architecture that we're going to have in that act, it's no longer going to be easy for departments to just take note of what we're sending or a directive or a finding. They will have to be forced in many ways to respond, to account, because at times they would see the reports coming and sort of ignore them. So those are some of the things which are coming in, the same way as the AG, which started just writing reports. Now they can report what they are seeing for it to be investigated. The Public Protector also, that test case which created a situation to say you can't ignore unless it is reviewed legally. So we've been looking at some of those as the legislative reforms are taking place.
So, I mean, part of the package, one then would imagine, which is something you've raised previously, is you need to be given teeth.
We need to be given teeth, but we can't wait for the teeth whilst you have some ways of getting around. For example, we realize that if you work with that forum of institutions supporting democracy, if you change the approach in dealing with the department, with the ministers, you begin to get greater cooperation. But it also helps to have an environment where people have realized the crisis we are facing in terms of service delivery, and the crisis we're facing in terms of corruption that has taken place because of the weakened institutions. Now everybody, public sector, everybody in the public, including citizens, are a lot more vigilant there is a lot more impetus and pressure. So we're riding on that as well.
But then, I mean, look, I mean, there has never been more focus on corruption, for example. But only yesterday, I mean, we were dealing here on the program with a report. Open Secrets has just issued a report looking, perhaps narrowly, at your Hawks and your National Prosecuting Authority. Why 9 years down the line, so many pages, thousands of pages of the state capture report, tens of cases that have been referred to state law enforcement agencies, but zero prosecutions. Now, I mean, in the same week, I mean, something that has gotten people talking, the MEC, Limpopo MEC, who, about the rent, about Zimbabweans. And, I mean, of course, there are people who support her. There are people who think that, whatever she said, true as it perhaps may be, the way it was said and where it was said, to whom it was said, actually goes against what our public service ethos should actually be.
Actually, the biggest problem that you're beginning to notice is that you do have a component of well-meaning public servants, but you have such fragmentation. Whether you're dealing with home affairs, where the issue of permit issuance comes in, the perception that you are looking at one department when in fact you have defense to guard the borders, you have police, you have bylaws, you have home affairs doing its part, is precisely the point of silos that has created the problems. A villager somewhere travels to town, or a person from informal settlement to get service from home affairs. And when they get there, they are told the systems are down. Very often our approach would be to blame that Home Affairs department, only to find that the internet is down. The service provider is the ICT SITA or any other provider. One day they come in, the power is down. If you begin to have coordination, only yesterday we had inspections in the forensic laboratories of the South African police. The basic problem there is that sometimes you have hard-working, well-meaning people who are quite passionate about their work. But there is this instruction, there is that department, there is that investigating officer, there is the police office, not working together. So the Public Service Commission, one of the things it ought to be recommending after seeing these problems is to say, in promoting an efficient and sound administration, you ought to first be working on these coordinations, working together with the departments, working together with various components to say, we point out to this particular problem. For example, the feedback we were getting from the people in the forensic lab was there would be no backlog as such if we knew what priority crimes were at times, so that we simply specialize or simply focus on those and speed them up. But because it's a generic approach, one hand doesn't know what the other one is doing.
But I mean, you would have thought, and I know this is not even a gray area, I mean, it's outside of your jurisdiction, but you have one country. Yes, you may have three spheres, of government, but you have one country. And at cabinet level, you have a minister for virtually, responsible for, you have ministers responsible for every aspect of our lives, And often you find that there is no coordination there. And these are people who meet fortnightly. And if you throw in the cabinet committee meetings, they meet virtually every week. right? And that's where you would think that the coordination comes from. That's where you would think that the bird's eye view comes from, and they then get to isolate, problems and make sure that they get dealt with. And the other arm of the state, your parliament, which is a committee that replicate all those departments and ministries, would then play their oversight roles when stuff comes up, with whether it's an Auditor General report. I mean, she's coming up with, in a few days' time, with another report about government departments. I will bet you that is not going to tell any good story. So, but you have those people not really playing their respective roles. Often you get a sense that they don't even attempt to do so.
Let's just admit and accept the reality that for some time now there's been the weakening of institutions. Once you have a patronage network at work, you elevate personalities rather than systems. Hence, this becomes a good business model for corruption, for inefficiencies, and so forth. Now that we know the cost of such lack of coordination, it's one of the things that Public Service Commission will be looking at and making recommendations. Government is also, there are certain reforms. I would dare say that at times when a forest grows, it doesn't make noise, but when one tree falls, it makes a lot of noise. There are many other reforms like your district development model. If it was effected, because we're notorious as a country for having some of the best policies, best systems, but not implemented. If it was implemented when national, provincial, and local government, district or local together, if they are tackling a particular project, they work together, you'll begin to see something. But that has not been the case. It has not been the case even when you have succession of ministers, imagine, or leaders, mayors. It's more like people are drawn from another country, from another party at times, even though they come from the same party. There is no handover, and there is no continuity, there is no institutional memory. Countries like Singapore, China, Malaysia, and so forth are where they are because they developed a blueprint for development and they stuck to it irrespective of who was the leader at a given time.
I mean, has there ever been an evaluation of the Batupili, program, which, I mean, for decades now has been, or is supposed to be, what drives our public service? In other words, to then like zoom in and say what went wrong, because clearly there was a, perhaps not so much a determination, but at least people agreed to rally around something. They identified the problem, and then Batupili was supposed to be what drives the change.
Indeed, as an ideal, Batupile was what should have been driving the change. In fact, the Public Service Commission had several reports evaluating the very application of this Batupile and the application of the principles of our Constitution. And it pointed out many failures. Among those, you could have a principle, you could have the slogans at times. If you have not changed the consciousness of people to unlearn the toxic culture and relearn the new values, that's why now the main focus of the Public Service Commission is the promotion of constitutional values. To say you can't just have a rules-based system without balancing that with a value-based system, because people maliciously comply. But once you create a sense of patriotism, you create a sense of belief and intrinsic value of these constitutional values, people will know and do what is right. But it's not just a matter of awareness, but it's a matter of internalizing that and having a new consciousness. leaders in their respective positions ought to champion this. It will take massive social engineering within the system itself. And that's why we're beginning to talk to the National School of Government, working together, what programs of training. That's why we're intending to talk with the Vice Chancellor of universities to say, as we change the gear, do we have all the elements of the ecosystem, from training to professional associations, speaking from the same page, promoting the same values?
You know, one of the things we've been examining on the program has been the social compact that the president has been talking about. Of course, more than 2 months after the deadline expired, we still don't have that. And over the past few weeks, we've been inviting, you know, labor, civil society, business, and so on, to sort of hear from them as to why this, was not happening. Now, the workers in particular, organized labor, COSATUs and the SAFTUs, are saying, because remember, from what the president said, that social compact, I mean, part of that social compact would have to be an agreement or an understanding, yes, but also an acceptance by everybody that there are sacrifices that would have to be made on the road to the country's economic recovery. Now, the workers are saying, hang on a minute. What you're basically asking us to do is to accept lower wages because you're not prepared to give us what we are overworked and we are underpaid. You want us to accept 2% increases when inflation is sitting at 6%, or so. So that's a non-starter. And the reason I'm raising all of this, I'm prefacing this with this, is because then when you say you're going to train people, or there's a new ethos, that they would have to, they're going to say, hang on a minute, I'm overpaid, I'm underworked. Do you think I've got time to be nice to the person I have to deal with? I can't, because my miseries are, because there are people who say they can't even, afford to go to work. It's pointless to actually take a job because you're going to take less than your transport and other costs.
Well, sometimes we tend to truncate the issue of the wage bill, salaries, and the effectiveness of public service. Once you have a professional, effective public service, even the worker who is in that system feels happier than what we are seeing at this stage. You take professional pride for what you are doing. Social compact is an overarching exercise that would need another discourse. In fact, we compacted to get into the new South Africa, but there the whole country was participating. Then you had a political settlement. Perhaps some people are saying you need to have a social compact of all role players, but this time focusing on the socio-economic condition of the country, including the intransigence of inequality, which is getting worse, unemployment, poverty, and so forth. Whilst that is being pursued, it would, as we argue as the Public Service Commission, be better if you create conducive environment for the very same workers, because many have been suffering under a fragmented system, under a system which has turned over, under a system that you do not have a sense of security. When one minister changes, you suddenly have the whole changes. DGs are out, some are suspended, some suspended for years, and so forth. As an institution that is receiving those grievances and complaints, we do believe that the current changes to professionalize, the current changes we're promoting, will also be a good deal for the well-being of workers who are there.
I mean, do you have the same understanding from politicians, talking about cabinet ministers and the likes? Because you tend to have far too, more frequent changes there than you'd have in the public service, for example. And the sense you get from worker leaders is that depending, on how the politicians sees their future, they would go out of their way, and even forget about what would have happened, agreements that would have been reached. If their boss at the time wants a particular outcome, they have to give their boss that outcome, come what may, because their future, your future as a minister, depends on who is the boss, at that particular time. So the rules or the agreements and everything gets thrown outside.
Actually, let me start by saying the professionalization framework is trying to say, let's have more security. DGs would have a longer tenure. Hence, in many other countries that are performing well, DGs have long-term contract. It is not tied to the political change, the next election, and so forth. That's the first thing. And therefore, it would create stability below. And secondly, you should have a professional meritocratic system that is equally able to interpret the mandate of any ruling party at a given time, but at the same time, not being partisan, but being able to say, this is the mandate, we carry out the mandate as public servants. Because there will come a time, as we have seen in the local government elections, when you have 5 parties coming together, minority government, and so forth. In such a situation, if you have a professionalized public service able to deliver services, you have eliminated, opportunities for corruption and so forth. You are likely going to have that as a shock absorber, even when you have political uncertainties, as we have seen in other countries. But in this particular case, I do think that we are looking at this turnover. In the last how many years, we've had 9 cabinet reshuffles. And in the very department that is supposed to be the anchor of building a capable developmental, state, the public service and administration, on average, ministers have been spending 2 years. And in the last 14 years or so, you might have had something like 9 or so.
Hence I'm asking whether there's an appreciation where it matters, but that these are the consequences of, cabinet reshuffle decisions and the likes.
But at least what is promising now is that we're speaking from the same page, where even government has indicated this as a problem, which means if it is implemented and there's political will to see it implemented, then you are likely going to have stability. And that stability creates space for certainty, which is also good for workers, good for professionals. No professional wants an environment where you do not know what's going to happen today and so forth. You develop a strategy, tomorrow you change it because ministers have changed. You develop a strategy, then there is another new, wave of a new policy and so forth. That discussion is beginning to come from the political leadership itself, from government itself, and it can only help us because we are amplifying that to say this is not sustainable, it's not tenable.
And then because often when you hear people, talking or analyzing problems and how to resolve them, people seem to feel, of course, depending on which side of this one is, that your police, your nurses, your teachers, those are frontline workers, are subjected to a completely different system. They're publicly scrutinized, but also the way they are dealt with, for instance, during wage negotiations, they feel is different from the way other public servants are treated. Whether we're talking about prosecutors, all the way to magistrates, judges, even the way things are negotiated. There's a central bargaining council for public service workers, but whereas judges go and say to the commission, don't temper, remember separation of powers. Okay, we are not going to get that. You're not going to give us that 1% you give the workers. We deserve 6%, So it's the way things are dealt with, depending on your where you are in the sort of ladder, is different. There's just no inherent fairness, in the process.
Well, unfortunately, that one is your public service and administration that deals with the salary issues. With us, we simply monitor the performance and advise accordingly on the effectiveness of administration. And I would actually defer that one to them. But at the same time, there are entities which are created to do an independent review of the conditions of service and salaries or remuneration of some of these entities you mentioned, like your judges, some commissioners from independent entities of the Constitution. But even in that space, it's not a matter of them coming forward to say this is what we want. Most of the time, those remuneration committees sit down, they do benchmark and so forth without much of an input. At least that's what I get from, some of the colleagues, the commissioners from the different Chapter 9 institutions.
Professor Fikeni, thank you very much for your time. And best of luck.
Well, thank you very much. We'll do our best. And we hope to come back and report about the work that has been done. But the main thing, public service should be people-centered.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Well, to this now, once upon a time, the party was home to many South Africans who embraced its political outlook. In 1994, after the first democratic elections, the Pan-Africanist Congress got 478 votes. 1,000 votes, I should be saying, earning themselves 5 votes in that election. But internal wrangles, floor crossing, were only some of the contributors to the party's misfortunes and decline. In 2019, the PAC could only secure 1 National Assembly seat. After enjoying a short period of relative peace and stability, one of the components of the Broad Mass Liberation Movement goes to an elective conference this weekend. Now, incumbent PAC President Mzwanele Nyonzo was supposed to join me this evening, but we don't know what has happened to him. We can't get hold of him. He has not been taking our calls since agreeing to the interview much earlier in the day. But we're also told that fighting broke out at the PAC's national conference in Seshego today, just outside of Polokwane. As delegates started with the registration process at the Ngwako Ramatlhodi Recreational Hall, fighting broke out when one group wanted to forcefully barge into the premises. According to the party's Limpopo chairperson, Dr. Pitso Mbasha, the violence was sparked by disgruntled members who are said to have rented a crowd. Delegates wearing PAC regalia were seen hitting each other with shamboks and pelting stones. Police were called in to maintain peace.
This is a peaceful Congress. As you see now, there is peace. But what we need to indicate is that where contestation is involved, you would expect those, remember, you win Congress or you lose Congress before it's sitting. People who realize is that numbers do not permit them to win would go rent a mob to come and disrupt congresses. And it is for the first time in history that we had such instances. In PAC, we rather go to court. We were not having this thing of physically assaulting each other, because PAC members in their nature and character, they are highly disciplined. As our slogan says, high moral, high discipline. That was an unfortunate act, and as leaders, we are not proud of it. Unfortunately, those that are hired, they have been also given our t-shirts. It appears as if these are the PAC members against PAC members. Remember now, the PAC is growing and it is threatening these current neo-colonial systems. So they will try by all means to finance and ensure that they sponsor those that are losing to come and cause havoc. But what moving forward now is how are we going to better address this? Because it might seem calm now, but we will anticipate that incidences might still again resurrect.
Well, we hope Mr. Nyonso's no-show has nothing to do with what the chairperson of the PAC in Limpopo was talking about, and hopefully their conference will go on peacefully and successfully, and they will come back and talk about what it is that they hope to give South Africans. That's our show for tonight and for the week. Do have a good night and a great weekend until we meet again on Monday.